Destiny 2 has featured some great weapons overall, but many of the ones coming from the Crucible vendor Lord Shaxx have been a bit underwhelming. But in Destiny 1, we had some amazing weapons from the Crucible Quartermaster vendor. After all, that's where the original Palindrome came from, which is now a top pick in Destiny 2. So in this video, we're taking a look at some of the most popular Crucible weapons from Destiny 1 and thinking about how they might fit into the modern sandbox. Starting in year 1 of D1, we have the Lord High Fixer. This is a 140 RPM hand cannon equivalent with a cult-like following. Along with a nice looking weapon model, it had access to some staple hand cannon perks like Rangefinder, Send It, and Third Eye, which made it a formidable weapon in the Crucible. Headshot enthusiasts often enjoyed using Outlaw because we didn't have nearly as many reload helpers back in D1. The perk Quick Draw would help when pairing it with a slower handling special weapon, and it had access to explosive rounds which weren't quite as popular back in D1, but we now understand the power of the flinch delivered from this perk. It also had a number of damage boosting perks like Crowd Control, Final Round, Luck in the Chamber, and Reactive Reload. So how good would the Lord High Fixer be today? Well, we have some incredible competition in the 140 RPM hand cannon department. The Palindrome, Fatebringer, and now the Eyasluna lead the legendary categories, so the Lord High Fixer would have to bring some really impressive stats and perks to make some waves. Before we get to the rest of the list, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is War Thunder. It's a free-to-play military game, and I've actually had a lot of fun with it so far. War Thunder is a game featuring battles between various types of military vehicles, and it's available on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. It also has crossplay, so you can play with your friends across any of these different platforms. It features over 2,000 models of military vehicles ranging from early 20th century designs all the way up to some modern stuff like you'd see on the battlefield today. I really got a kick out of playing around with some of the tanks featured in the World War II and Vietnam eras. The driving mechanics feel pretty good, and the aiming is actually pretty intuitive as well. Once you get the hang of it, it's a lot of fun, and you can make some great plays like my 5,000 IQ teammate over here. The vehicles are incredibly customizable with an insane number of camo and decal options, so you can make them look basically however you can possibly imagine, and the game covers a wide range of locations that are really fun to battle on. For us Destiny players, it even has a control mode, so you're going to feel right at home. And if you've always wanted to dominate the skies, it has some fun flight mechanics with all the planes. And of course, it has nukes that destroy everything on the map. If you want to give it a try, just click on the link in the video description and you'll get some unique vehicles and 3 days of access to a premium account. Even if you already have an account going, you can get some of the unique vehicles. These rewards are available to both new and returning players. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring the video, and leave a comment down below if you decide to give it a shot. Okay, next up on our list is the weapon that you might want to defend yourself in a doomsday scenario, the Zombie Apocalypse. In early Destiny 1, the perk Field Scout would let you hold a crazy amount of heavy ammo for your machine gun in PvP. If you were careful with how you spent it, you could run around for basically the entire match with heavy ammo. It also had access to aggressive ballistics, which made each of the bullets hit harder. In Destiny 2, barrel options don't increase the damage anymore, but in Destiny 1, that was actually a thing. The Zombie had a rate of fire stat of 77, which would put it just a bit faster than the 450 RPM Thunderlord, but not quite as fast as the 900 RPM beast like the Thermal Erosion. I'd love to see this archetype return in Destiny 2 to bridge that RPM gap for machine guns. Next up is one of my favorite early auto rifles in Destiny 1, the Grim Citizen. This was a 77 rate of fire auto rifle in Destiny 1, which would match the base fire rate of the Suros regime. It had some great consistency perks like Persistence, Rangefinder, Perfect Balance, and Hammer Forged. And it also had Reactive Reload, which was the D1 version of Kill Clip. You could pair this with Outlaw for some incredible lethality and fast reloads. Although it might not have been as popular as the Suros or the Shadow Price in the first auto rifle meta of D1, it was a great weapon overall, and I'd love to see it return in D2 as another solid option in the auto rifle category. The final boss was a 37 rate of fire sniper, which would match up with the current 140 RPM Praetor's Revenge. It had the famous ambush and short gaze sights, which were community favorites in D1, and it had unflinching to cut down on the incoming flinch while you were scoped. It also had snapshot for the faster ADS speed. The final column perks weren't great for a sniper, but occasionally Clown Cartridge would get you some extra kills with that larger magazine. These 140 RPM snipers in Destiny 2 did have their time in the sun background Forsaken with the Supremacy and the Twilight Oath, but these days they require 3 body shots to land a kill, so they just aren't being used all that much in PvP. For the Vooper fans out there, D1 also had a fantastic fusion rifle called the 77 Wizard. This was the first fusion rifle that I really remember dominating PvP in vanilla Destiny 1. With options like Rangefinder, Hipfire Grip, Perfect Balance, and Hammer Forged, you could get an incredible fusion rifle in your hands if you got lucky with the right roll. It was on the slower end of the charge spectrum, featuring a high impact stat, and this meant that you had to anticipate your target's movement. But if you managed to learn the timing and the bolt pattern, you could absolutely map someone with this fusion. I would put this thing up there with the Praetorian Foil and the original Pocket Infinity for the fusions that I remember most nostalgically in Destiny 1. I'd love to see it make a comeback in Destiny 2 at some point, especially since we've recently seen fusions climbing up in the meta thanks to our friend Xur. Moving on to the Dark Below expansion, we have the classic pulse rifle with 3 Ys, the 123 SYZYGY. This was a high rate of fire pulse rifle similar to the modern day Darkest Before. In early Destiny 1, pulse rifles didn't see a whole lot of action compared to auto rifles and the famous exotic hand cannons. Here's our favorite lore master Byf explaining the lay of the land back in the very early days of Destiny PvP.
Now, here's the problem. Nobody uses pulse rifles. Pulse rifles right now are one of the most underrepresented groups of weapons in the game. In fact, I believe they are the most underrepresented groups of weapons in the game.
The only pulses that got much attention back then were the Red Death and the Bad Juju, and that's basically thanks to their exotic perks. So despite this particular one not getting a whole lot of love at the time, it actually had the makings for a great pulse rifle when it would later be buffed in patch 1.1.1.
Yeah, boy.
It had access to full auto, which was really helpful on such a fast firing pulse. It had rangefinder to help with the effective range, counterbalance to control the recoil, reactive reload for that extra damage after a kill, and third eye for players who never wanted to lose their radar. While it certainly wasn't a gun that defined the meta, it was a solid pulse rifle in the same archetype that later did dominate the meta with options like the Grasp of Moloch and later the Clever Dragon. These are in a pretty good spot in Destiny 2 right now with the Grid Skipper and the Darkest Before being great dueling options. And I think we can always enjoy another fast firing pulse rifle, especially if it comes with access to kill clip for those clean 2 bursts. Next up is one of my personal favorite machine guns in all of Destiny history, Against All Odds. This was a heavy hitting 61 impact beast that could roll with some incredible perks. From what I recall, the extra damage from aggressive ballistics and the barrel options would actually allow you to 3-tap with the heavy hitting machine guns. It also had the perk Take a Knee, which made the unruly machine guns much easier to manage while you're crouched. Field Scout would allow you to run around with entirely too much heavy ammo, and reactive reload could increase the damage even further if you had enough ammo to reload after a kill. This was a fantastic machine gun in Destiny 1, but we don't really see the 360 RPM options being used all that often in D2. It seems like most players find the 450s a bit easier to use, but who knows, maybe if Against All Odds comes back someday, it could change that. One of the funniest names for any D1 weapon was the Trolley Problem. Bravo to whoever at Bungie named that one. There's not a whole lot to say about this weapon since it's very similar to the 77 Wizard, which we already covered, but just a little bit less impact and a faster charge rate. But hey, if they want to add it back, I'm not going to complain about more fusion rifle options to try in PvP. 2 to the Morgue was a 14 rate of fire shotgun that I believe would be similar to the lightweight frame shotguns in Destiny 2. So while it lacked a bit compared to the Felwinter's Lie for the one-shot kill range, it did make up for it with a faster follow-up shot. It could roll with a number of great shotgun perks. Luck in the Chamber would randomly buff one of the shots to deal some extra damage, which could help you land that one-hit kill. It was the same deal with Final Round, except that one would automatically apply the bonus damage to the very last shot. Knee pads was a great perk on shotguns to increase the slide distance, similar to modern day Stompies, but built right into the weapon. It also had Quick Draw to help swap weapons faster, or Hammer Forge to help max out the range. And most importantly, it had Shot Package, which Destiny 2 players have come to either love or hate on the reissued Felwinter's Lie. 2 to the Morgue was a great and very popular shotgun in its prime, and if they gave it a lightweight frame bonus in Destiny 2, I think this one would instantly become a very popular pick. Next up is one of the more popular snipers in Destiny history, the Longbow Synthesis. If you have some extra time on your hands, go watch some past YouTube videos of just how many players freaked out when trying to get this elusive sniper to drop with an S-roll. It battled the LDR 5001 as the premier sniper in PvP for quite a while, and for good reason. With a generous aim assist stat, community favorite sites like Ambush and Short Gaze, and some great perks, it was just a beast of a sniper. It had access to Unflinching to cut down on the incoming flinch, Snapshot to improve the ADS speed, and Hidden Hand to provide some extra aim assist. We've recently seen the 1000 Yard Stare making a big comeback in Destiny 2, and I'd love to see the famous Longbow make a return someday as well. I think it would immediately be a very coveted weapon as long as it had Snapshot. Moving on to the House of Wolves expansion, I feel like this is by far the most forgettable list of the Crucible vendor weapons. I do recall coming up against a few of these different names, but I guess the sheer dominance of the meta weapons like the Last Word, Thorn, Hawkmoon, and the Messenger casts a pretty huge shadow on these options. If you think any of these weapons deserve to be on the list, let me know in the comments. In Destiny 1 Year 2, the meta shifted quite a bit thanks to some big balance changes. The sidearm fans out there will rejoice at our next weapon on the list, the Havoc Pigeon. This was a challenger to the Iron Wreath D that came from the Iron Banner. Sidearms in Destiny 1 were interesting because they consumed special ammo instead of primary ammo. This meant that if you wanted to use one, you were giving up your shotgun, sniper, or fusion rifle, but the payoff if you were adept with the sidearms was pretty high. In particular, they became popular pairings with a No Land Beyond sniper rifle that consumed primary ammo. The Havoc Pigeon could roll with Rangefinder to bump out its effective range, or some damage perks to increase the lethality after a kill. It also had access to Battle Runner, which was an interesting perk to speed up your sprint speed after you landed a kill. Sidearms were recently buffed in D2 on PC by changing them to always be hitscan weapons, and they've always been pretty scary in the hands of a good console player as well. So I'd love to see this model with a suppressor make it back into Destiny 2. I can't make this list without briefly touching on how insane rockets used to be in Destiny 1 PvP. The Smolder was just one of these rockets which could roll with the perk Grenades and Horseshoes, which made rockets explode with proximity detonation to the target. This perk alone made rockets a terrifying weapon to face in the Crucible, and the Smolder could also roll a tripod to give you 3 rockets in the tube. We don't have this perk available on legendary rockets in Destiny 2, and maybe that's a good thing, but if the Smolder ever did come back into the game with proximity detonation, it would instantly be a top pick for the heavy slot. And of course, we can't talk about Year 2 PvP without mentioning the infamous meta pulse rifle, the Hawksaw. This pulse came during an interesting era in Destiny just after the exotic hand cannon trio of the Last Word, Hawkmoon, and Thorn had been nerfed. Hawksaw was easy to use, had some options for a very clean sight aesthetic, and had some great perks. You could build it out with high stability or high range with perks like Counterbalance, Rangefinder, Perfect Balance, and Hammer Forged. And if you needed extra aim assist, you could get it from the perk Hidden Hand. You could also get your inner accuracy from Icarus. It was one of those weapons that just felt great to use and defined the meta for a decent period of time in early Year 2. Unfortunately for the Hawksaw, it featured the same archetype as the modern 450 RPM pulse rifles like the Bat Juju. In Destiny 2 right now, this archetype is really struggling to keep up with some of the better options. If this archetype ever got a buff though, I could see Hawksaw making a huge splash in the meta once again. Moving on to Year 3 Crucible weapons, the most noteworthy guns here are actually already back in Destiny 2, the Palindrome and Eyasluna. These hand cannons heavily dominated the meta for a long period of time, and PvP fans were ecstatic to get a nice roll on either of them. But we did have a few other Year 3 Crucible weapons that were worth noting. The Event Horizon was a high impact sniper similar to the modern day Frozen Orbit. It could roll a snapshot or quick draw to improve the ADS speed and Hidden Hand to improve aim assist. If you were a crack shot, you could also proc the perk Perfectionist, which would refund all of your shots if you only landed precision kills. This was definitely a rare occurrence, but it was a pretty cool idea for a perk. Shout out to one of my favorite snipers of all time, the Still Piercer. The Hexcaster was a bullet hose auto rifle like the Atheon's Epilogue or Doctrine of Passing. Unfortunately, this archetype never made it into Destiny 2 since the 900 RPM auto rifles would perhaps overlap too much with SMGs. I'd love to see this archetype come into Destiny 2 at some point, and I think they'd be incredibly fun to use. The Hexcaster could get Rangefinder to extend its range, or Persistence to improve accuracy the longer you fired. You could build it out for stability or range, and it also had Third Eye to keep your radar up while you're aiming down sights. So I want to hear from you, which Crucible weapons from Destiny 1 would you add to this list? I'd love to see some of these in Destiny 2, maybe we'll get lucky with them in the Witch Queen. If you like this kind of video, be sure to subscribe and also hit the like button, and if you want to see another one, check out my video on the Better Iron Banner loot from Destiny 1. It's a video on the top right of your screen and also linked in the description.